Welcome to the Literature Lounge, where writers and authors share their stories behind their stories. Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Aseem Chhabra, a film journalist, freelance writer, and a film festival programmer based in New York City. He's the author of the best-selling books on Shashi Kapoor, Priyanka Chopra, and Irrfan Khan. His work has been published in prominent media outlets such as the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Outlook, Mumbai Mirror, and Reader.com. Aseem used to write regular columns. He still does, for Mumbai Mirror for 9 years. I think you don't write that anymore. Also for The Hindu. He's also appeared as a commentator on Indian cinema and popular culture on NPR, CNN, BBC, ABC's Good Morning America, Associated Press, and Reuters. In addition to his writing and commentary, Aseem Chhabra is actively involved in film festivals, and where films are very, very close to my heart. So this is a episode that's very, very intrinsically, I'm connected to Aseem at this moment while we are talking. He serves as the festival director for both the New York Indian Film Festival and the Silk Screen Asian American Film Festival in Pittsburgh. And I love Pittsburgh. I have stayed in Pittsburgh, and we're going to talk about all of this, Aseem. You've also lent your voice to the character Shadow Puppet in with director Nina Paley's award-winning animated film Sita Sings the Blues. Have I got her
Yes,
name right? Nina
Nina
Paley?
Paley,
Yeah,
yeah.
all right. Nina Paley. Your passion for cinema and behind the scene insights make you a valuable contributor in the world of films. And film world has totally changed from before to now, and the evolution is unbelievable because I think it's such a social commentary also. So welcome to today's show, Aseem. It's extremely heartfelt because I've followed your writing, and I think that this is like a deja vu because I wanted to talk to you, and I guess this is the right time for you and me to connect at the Literature
Yes.
Lounge. So let's just start a little bit about, the moment, the pivotal moment, in your writing journey. Let's just begin with that, Aseem.
Well, my father was a journalist. Um, he did political journalism and specialized in African studies. So my original training actually was in political writing. Also, I went to Columbia Journalism School. But even before I went to Columbia in 1981, I started freelancing in Delhi. I've written for Hindustan Times, and there used to be Junior Statesman. There were a bunch of youth-oriented magazines, etc. I was writing for them. Um, Times of India, Indian Express, but just very little. And then I went to the US, and my training was in political writing. But I think because I'd had a passion for films, I mean, I never went to any film school or any. I've never attended any film appreciation classes or something like that. It's my own reading. It's my own observing, watching films, listening to people talk about films that I've learned myself. And I was able to, at some stage, convince editors that I could write about films also besides writing about politics. Um, and as sort of transitioned, it's interesting how looking back, it's not like you plan your life in such a way. I wanted to do some film writing, but I didn't realize that this would become the whole career graph for me. And I'm very happy that I've been a freelancer for a very long time now in the US, and now I'm partly in India also. But I'm very happy that I think the universe sort of works in your favor if you want to do something very badly. If you work towards it, if you talk to people, um, then things sort of you know your path is sort of created as such.
Absolutely. I completely agree with this because, when I rebooted, I used to follow you on Instagram. And because I'd just gotten movie at that time. And, for me, international cinema also holds a very special place in my heart. And films is my first love. Along with, no, writing is my first love, and
That's
film
okay.
is the
Yeah.
stepsister. So let's just talk a little bit about your book, Irfan Khan, The Man, the Dreamer, the Star, which offers a very intimate glimpse, into the life of a absolutely remarkable actor, one of my favorite actors. And what inspired you to delve, into Irfan Khan's story?
Well, I discovered Irfan rather late because I was living in the US. And it started to work on the book on Irfan. I suddenly realized that I had seen him in a couple of films, for instance. I'd seen in a film called Drishti, which was Govind Nilani's film in the late 1980s. Um, I discovered Irfan when I realized who he was. I was visiting Mumbai in the early 80s, and I saw the editor friend of mine, Nikhil Lakshman, who I dedicate the book to. He took me to see Makbul, and I was absolutely blown away. I mean, I had not seen any work by Vishal Bhardwaj before that. I knew of his music and things like that, but I had not seen that. But I was absolutely blown away by the way the Macbeth story and Vishal sort of like, and Abbas Tayarwala, the script they wrote together, they brought the Makbul story into the Bombay underworld um, with a great cast. And Irfan was still very young. I mean, there's Pankaj Kapoor in it, there's Asiruddin Shah, there is Om Puri, and in the middle of it is this young Irfan who's playing Makbul, who it's a little different than Macbeth because in Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are married. Here they are not married, but they sort of have a secret liaison relationship. Um, what drew me to Irfan first and foremost in that film was his eyes, and I write about his eyes again and again. And Meera Nair sort of referred to it as his hooded eyes when she discovered him as an actor at National School of Drama at that time. He was still a student. Um, it's really fascinating how um, it's Irfan's wife Shutapa once said to me, Bhagwan ki deen hai, so that is true. God gives you your features and everything else, or whatever. You can believe in God or not. But um, how he used his physicality, his eyes, to express often loneliness, to express often regret, express range of emotions. Love. Um, in Makbul, he's a very calculating character. Um, what fabulous eyes! I mean, I even quote in the book. Tom Hanks talks about his eyes. They acted in a film called Inferno, I think 2012 or something. Um, and what's really fascinating about Irfan is that he came from a middle class family in Jaipur. Although I personally think Irfan was a very very sexy actor, and he could be really very good looking. In fact, his uh, friend Tigmanshu Dhulia talked about how he could appeal to the intellectual sort of women as such, sexy. But Irfan himself felt that he didn't have the kind of looks that would take him to the Hindi film industry. He went to National School of Drama, but he wanted to be in films. Um, he talked about how he saw Mithun Chakravarti in a film that Mrinal Sen directed. That was Mithun's first film, Rigya, and he said if Mithun can sort of with
Rigaya.
again not those Shubhitra Chatterjee, Utpal Dutt kind of looks act in a film like that, so why can't I? Um, but there was also this thing in the man about the hunger. He always wanted good roles and perform, and Irfan used to get bored very easily. So he constantly wanted to be challenged. And he was very, I mean, after years of struggle, of course, the 1990s, he was doing television work just to survive in Bombay. But once he started getting work, in fact, his first film as a lead actor is a film called The Warrior, which very few people in India have seen it. And I saw it much, few years after Makbul. It's directed by a British Indian filmmaker called Asif Kapadia. And the film opening shot is just his eyes. And if you look into the wide screen, it's amazing that Asif had already discovered the power of his eyes. Um, and so you realize that looks and everything else is not what makes an actor. It's that something from within, which Irfan would do again and again, and he would transform himself from one kind of character to another character, and he could be romantic and peak Ru and Kareeb single, and he could be a middle-aged man with lots of regrets in the namesake. So what a fabulous man he was.
Piku.
Yeah, that's what I said. Pico, he was very romantic.
He was
I
also
mean,
there in
there,
Piku. He was romantic, and I think I mean, I don't know, probably people will not like this, but I thought he had just overshadowed the
And
big
you're right. And you're
B
right
even
in a
in
lot of
that
ways
film.
because,
And,
that was the first time,
it
not just
was,
romantic, but also I saw the comedy in him. And it's not loud comedy. There are scenes in Piku, and we can talk about it later also. There are scenes in Piku
wow.
where Irfan's character, Rana, cannot believe the way this father and daughter, played by Deepika Padukone and Amitabh Bachchan, the father, they're constantly bickering, and there's a long, car ride from Delhi to Calcutta. And he just has this look on his face like, where the hell am I stuck, for instance? Or he shares glances with Deepika often. And there's even a scene, I think, they're having lunch or something in Calcutta in the family house, and Deepika even says, "What?" And like, why are you looking at me like that? Without dialogues there, Irfan is saying like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're living this life," kind of a thing, and you and your father, and so there, it was a very interesting form of comedy.
I
Um,
have to take a cue from there, Asim, because I still remember in Piku when, Deepika Padukone goes and sits at the back and he refuses to drive the car. And there's no dialogue. He just sits quietly, refusing to start the ignition of the car. And then the caretaker goes at the back and Deepika comes and sits in front. And that's when he wears his seat belt and he starts driving. And everything is spoken and done just with the eyes. So,
One
I
of my
mean,
favorite scenes, yeah, one of my favorite scenes towards the end, second half, is they both, one day Piku and Rana go for you know, they go to the Ganga
Ghat.
Ghat, and she says something very relevant, that the parents become your children, and you have to, she says, I know my father's a pain, but I have to sort of deal with him. And although they have not expressed that they're in love with each other, she says that he's my father is a baggage that I'll have to carry whoever I marry. And then she says something, I can't remember. She says that शादी करोगे, something bolo ऐसे करोगे, and he says माथा खराब नहीं है मेरा.
That's an iconic one when he looks with a smile and he says, "Matha kharab nahi hai mera." Yes. Oh God, Asim, I can go on and on. So tell us a little bit about Irfan Khan's early days, and his formative years at NSD, the National School of Drama.
So he, even before National School of Drama, so he was born in Rajasthan, a middle class sort of a family. Um, his father was very much interested in, they had a sort of a business of tires or something, but his father was not at all business. His father gave away a lot of the business, passed it on to his brother. His father was interested in just hunting, and he would take Irfan for hunting. And Irfan's mother never liked the son going for hunting. And um, as the story goes, Irfan actually, when he was young, didn't like animals being killed because children are like that. And his father would say that this Brahmin has been born in a Pathan family. You know, um, later, many years later, I think Manchu Dhulia told me that Irfan would make this great yakni pulao. So obviously, he became a meat eater. Um, Irfan loved to fly kites. That was one of his real passions, and cricket also. But really, passion was kites, and in fact, kites had a big impact on him. When he was 7 years old, he fell off the roof of his because he was trying to get a kite that was stuck in some wires, and he fell and he broke his arm. And his mother didn't. His father was out one of the hunting tours. His mother got some sort of a masseur to take care of his arm, but he always the arm didn't heal properly at the bones, so his one arm was always slightly defective, and he was very conscious about it. And I think once you told me that how Irfan would get very upset if any film he had to wear half sleeve shirts, like the one I'm wearing basically. Um, he watched some films, and at some stage, but very little, but some stage he got very interested in cinema. But how do you get into cinema? So he started doing theater, and by the time he was in Jaipur University, he was doing a diploma course in cinema in theater. Um, and they did some really good plays, but then there was also some very filmy kind of plays. But what's fascinating is that he um, heard about the National School of Drama. Now, how did he hear about National School of Drama? Because Irfan's two real heroes at that time were Nasiruddin Shah and Om Puri. and he knew that they had both come out of National School of Drama, especially Nasiruddin Shah. In the early days, even in National School of Drama, Irfan was really imitating Nasiruddin Shah's style of acting. Um, when you apply it to the National School of Drama in those days, at least, this is in the mid 80s, you have to, on paper, show that you had acted in 10 plays, and Irfan actually had not acted in 10 plays. And he would love to tell the story about the fact that he actually lied in his on his application. Um, um, it was a class of 18 students that year, um, including two women who really impacted his life. Chinappa Sikdar, who became his girlfriend, started dating and then married, and the mother of his two children, and Meeta Vishisht, who's a very well-known actress also. Meeta and Irfan actually were very, very competitive at National School of Drama, and Meeta even told me that one time, when they were in the first year itself, they ended up having some big fight, including them hitting each other, and they didn't even know what they were fighting. They were always very competitive, but they were always very good friends also. And Meeta and he did lots of plays even after they graduated from National School of Drama, some television work also. What's interesting about National School of Drama is that Irfan was very, very shy. I mean, I spoke to a bunch of people. Tigmanchu was 2 years junior to him. Vipin Sharma, who's like 1 year senior to him. They all talked about how shy he was. He had gotten a single room. It was in the corner. This was in Delhi, near Mandi House, where National School of Drama is. And he had a corner room, and he would always sit there smoking beedi. But he was always very curious. Now, and because he came from a middle class sort of a Hindi speaking family, although Hindi Urdu speaking family, although he went to an English medium school, he felt that he didn't have the kind of exposure that some of the other students, including Shuttappa, Meeta had come from Chandigarh. Um, so he was hungry for so much information. He was constantly reading books. He was constantly reading plays and scripts. And Tigmanchu and he actually initially connected because they were both interested Tigmanchu was younger, junior to him, interested in Hollywood films, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro's films. So, um, but he grew very fast. I mean, I think Vanshu has told me that he was really the growth in Irfan was more than anybody else he had ever seen, because he really was constantly reading. Um, thing was, he joined National School of Drama. National School of Drama was very clear at that time. They wanted the students to act in plays. Now, even now in India, theater is not a very viable kind of a profession. Irfan always wanted to work in films. So he told two lies when he applied to National School of Drama. One, that he had done 10 plays. He had not done 10 plays. But the other lie he told was that he would definitely do theater. But he started looking for films and television work very soon after that.
So, he's really known for choosing very unconventional roles, so this really made him stand out, in the Indian cinema. So, success obviously is not that easy to come by. And because, one comes from a middle class background, one would imagine that one, would probably also be hungry for that. So, you would have known him very well. How do you think he navigated, or did it ever occur to him that it was important to have commercial success and not just artistic fulfillment?
Well, the commercial success. So I briefly mentioned the 1990s when he was mostly doing television. There was some good television also he did, but he never found it challenging, etc. The initial films he did, Makpool, Hasil, um, The Warrior, which I mentioned, which was released so late, really, even in the US and England, and barely, and it hardly has been seen in India. Um, those were small films. I mean, commercial success took a while for Irfan. By the time he started acting in films like The Namesake, for instance, Pan Singh Tomar, which won a national award. Uh, it's the performances that were actually he was being noticed for. He started becoming in bigger films. He was in Life in Metro, which Anurag Basu directed, which has a range of actors, and Irfan has some of the funniest scenes with Konkana in that. Um, Irfan also, on this, while he was doing films like Makbul, etc., he did a couple of films produced by Mahesh Bhatt and Pooja Bhatt, for instance. One is Rogue, in which Irfan acts with a Brazilian actress, kind of a very strange film. Um, he was trying different things, but at all times he was hungry he really wanted meaty roles. And they came his way. It took a while. They came his way. I mean, even when he got Makbool, for instance, then it took some time for some other work to come. The Namesake, for instance, is 2006. By the time he did something like Lunchbox, which is also one of his finest performances, that was 2013. Anup Singh's Kissa, the tale of a lonely ghost, also was 2013. In fact, both Lunchbox and Kissa premiered at the Toronto Film Festival the same year. Um, Irfan was a successful star, but he was never a Shah Rukh Khan, and I don't think he was aiming to do that. I mean, Kareem Singhal made money. Uh, some of his latter films did rather well at the box office. Hindi medium did very well. Um, but there was always a balance he was maintaining. I mean, even when he started getting major Hollywood work, I mean, he was in the Jurassic World and the Amazing Spider-Man and Inferno. He was still doing smaller films in India. So it was not always a commercial success that he was looking for.
He's had his, he's really left a indelible mark, and it's been an illustrious, film career of his. So, what was his approach, to his craft and, the characters that he kind of portrayed? Would you like to share with us, especially now that you've had such close encounters? Would you like to share with our listeners what is it that he inculcated?
I think what I've learned from directors. I mean, Irfan was a trained actor. Okay, he went to theater school, but a trained actor, as opposed to somebody like Tabu. Irfan and Tabu did two amazing films together. Makbool and
Namesake.
the Namesake. Um, Tabu doesn't have any kind of acting, and yet their acting styles was meshed. Vishal Bhardwaj once talked about Irfan had a small sort of a supporting role, but a very powerful role in Haider. He plays Rudar, who's actually the ghost who comes to tell Haider Hamlet about the fact that the mother and uncle were involved in his father's death. And there's a scene in which Rudar has been is in a prison and was being shot, and everything was being set up. And Vishal Bhardwaj noticed that Irfan was sitting in a corner, and lights and everywhere, and cameras, actors were coming in and out and all. And it occurred to Vishal that Irfan had on his own just gotten into the character, and the noise around, he had shut it off. So he had this way of focusing on himself. But at the same time, he would sometimes, I can't remember which film it was. I remember talking to a particular actor where there was some scene in which Irfan had to feed dialogues to the actor, and usually, and the camera is on the actor, and usually, often, or didn't even have any dialogues. Basically, his presence and the other actor was reacting, and usually they have some stand-in actor or something like that. Irfan stood there because he wanted the other actor to be able to react to him, the character he was playing. Um, Irfan was a very generous actor. And so it was, while I talked about how he went and sat in the corner and became the character, the film was always about everybody, not just about Irfan. And that was very important to him. It was the whole thing was a joint project where everybody cooperated and worked together. Films have different stories about how he sort of got into the character, of course, but
So let's just talk about the success of Slumdog Millionaire, and his obviously his career took a very significant turn. So can you just discuss with us the impact, of this film on the global recognition of Indian actors? Because I think, there's small steps now, and India is recognized. So tell us a little bit about that.
so before Slumdog Millionaire, and I just want to just touch upon Millionaire was released in 2008. Actually, 2007 we started going to film festivals. Before Slumdog Millionaire, Irfan was in a film. The Namesake was 2006, and that had already played in the West. It had done fairly good business. It made like 14, $15 million, which is very good business in the US for a small independent film. And he acted in a film called A Mighty Heart with Angelina Jolie. Um, it's a story about Daniel Pearl, who was a Wall Street Journal reporter. It's based on the book written by his widow, Marion Pearl. Marion and Daniel Pearl were in Pakistan just after the 9/11, and Daniel Pearl was kidnapped by the Pakistani Taliban and killed.
Yes.
So 2007, he was done. So by the time he was cast in Slumdog Millionaire, um, it was 2007, 2008 kind of a thing. Now Irfan had a supporting role in that, as did Anil Kapoor, although Anil Kapoor had a much bigger, larger role. The two lead actors were played by Patel, who's like a huge star now, and Frida Pinto, who's also a very rather big star, but they had not acted before. What's really interesting is that when by the time Irfan was still trying to measure what was the success of Slumdog Millionaire for him. Now he did get an agent in Hollywood because of Slumdog Millionaire, um, but Slumdog Millionaire swept the Oscars. I think it won 8 Oscars that night, and especially when it won the best film. Usually, what happens is the producer, of course, goes to accept the award, but the entire cast also comes. And you can see the video on YouTube where you have Anil Kapoor who's jumping and very excited, and there was Dev Patel thrilled. He was a kid. He was 17, 18 years old. Frida was young also. Irfan is also standing there, but he has this sort of a confused look on his face. And he talked about later about how he realized he didn't have a lead role in it. He said if Dev Patel had a lead, if I had Dev Patel's role, which was of course not possible, it was an age difference issue. Um, then I would have sort of celebrated. He almost said it was like he was there in somebody else's wedding. But what his performance, and even for Anil Kapoor and for Dev and Frida Pinto, what the film basically did was it opened up the world for all of them. I mean, Anil Kapoor also managed to get a role in Mission Impossible. He was in 24/7, and for Irfan, suddenly, I mean, he did 3 Hollywood franchises: The Amazing Spider-Man, he did Jurassic World, and he did Inferno, which is sort of a sequel to the Da Vinci Code. All of those projects came his way. Another very big project that came his way, but he had to say no. Christopher Nolan's Interstellar was a supporting role was offered to Irfan, and he really regretted because that role required he had to be in Hollywood for like 4 or 5 months. And it was around the same time he had committed to do Lunchbox and D-Day, and he chose to do those 2 films, which I'm glad he did because
Which are both, again, Lunchbox is just again one of my absolute favorite films. I mean, I can keep going watching it over and over again. I just think the nuances in that film, is unbelievably beautiful. So let's just talk a little bit about, Irfan has very successfully navigated Hollywood and Bollywood, and yet there is a very authentic Irfan style, in that. So, how many actors obviously are very challenged, especially when they go, and cross over to the international cinema, the accent, the body language, all of that somehow has a change. But with Irfan, it just stays the same. So, tell us a little bit about, let's just delve into who he was and how did he maintain this authenticity, in spite of crossing over, which I think most actors actually dream of doing and getting that international recognition. So tell us a little
yeah,
about that.
I think it had to do with a few things: the middle class roots. Um, it had to do with the theater training. It had to do with him observing actors like Nasiruddin Shah, Om Puri, who, despite all the successes, and Om Puri had a big career in the West also, they remained very grounded. I look at an actor like Shah Rukh Khan, for instance. Shah Rukh is so wealthy. He's so successful and so wealthy. But when you talk to Shah Rukh, you see the Delhi middle class boy still. I mean, you can't help it. And even in Irfan's case, you couldn't help it, of course. At a certain stage, he started dressing better. He was living a much better life in Bay. He could own an apartment. He bought a farmhouse out there. Um, but I think, thank God, he stayed rooted because of where he was coming from. Because the roles that he did, I don't think a lunchbox role in 2013, which was way after he had got into films, really, would have been possible by an actor who would have become this very big sort of like, if he had this thing in his head, like, I'm a big star. He was a star, but he measured it and he kept it, but he didn't let that impact his performance. The script was important. The role he was playing was important to him. The director he was going to play, was working was very important to him. And he could be just a lonely widower in the lunchbox. That's why he could be Sergeant Fernandez. Uh, he didn't have to do loud films. The kind of work that Salman Khan, for instance, did. Amitabh Bachchan, being such a fine actor, started doing very, very big, loud films. Irfan rarely went there. What's very interesting is that Irfan did not do much of singing and dancing in films. And there was a time point, you must have heard of All India Bakchod AIB, this comedy group, which was then, because of some complications, it was abandoned. Uh, they did a video which is available on YouTube. It's called a Bollywood song, where if they wanted Irfan to do something entirely different than what Irfan had ever done in films. So they shoot this, and of course, it's a 14-minute video basically, in Vasan Bala directed. First half is Irfan talking about, "Ha, main to kuch bhi kar lunga," etc. They shot a song in a bar with all these, the drinks flowing and these sexy girls, and the kind that, like the big Bollywood films do that. And Irfan is singing and dancing in that. Um, he did it for fun. I don't think they paid him any money or something like that. He gave 3 or 4 days to them, while in between doing some, major work. But he wanted to challenge himself again, that I can do this singing and dancing kind of a thing, what big stars do. And he wanted to have fun, because then he would go back and do something very, very serious and sort of down to earth. Uh, what a fascinating man he was, really.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally, absolutely. So, I mean, let's just talk a little bit about Meera. Nair had uncast him, from a very pivotal role in Salaam, Bombay. And so that must have been a very, very heartbreaking point in his career, because Salaam, Bombay went on to really change the way audiences in India were also watching films. And it's a film that had impacted me very, very deeply,
All of
and a
us,
film
yeah,
that I
yeah.
can go back, yeah, for all of us. I think we go back to that film time and again and always marvel at those new things that you keep finding every time you watch. The performances of the most amazing actors were all there. So it was obviously, this whole experience would have tested his resilience and his determination to succeed. And so tell us a little bit about this entire scene where he was not this entire part where he was not given a pivotal role in that film.
So it's not the question that it's not just the fact that Salam Bombay ended up doing so well. He went to the Cannes Film Festival, won the Camera d'Or, and was India's official entry for the Oscars. It was nominated for the best foreign language film. That Irfan did not know what he was going to happen. Meera and I cast him while Irfan was still a student at the National School of Drama. She went to National School of Drama because she was looking for actors, and in the basement there was some rehearsal for a play, and she saw him and was really, I mean, she was looking at a lot of actors, but it was Irfan that drew her attention. And she went the second day again to check on him, and then went to him and said, "Listen, we're going to be doing a workshop in Bombay. Are you willing to come for a couple of months? Maybe I think it was 2 months or something like that. Workshop with street children. So we have some trained actors and some street children, and we want you to work with them, and then we will go on to make this film." Now, can you imagine? You're a student, you're a second year or third year student, and of course, there are 18 other people, the 17 other people in your class. And while they were friends, there was competition, there was rivalry. I'm sure they were all envious, if not jealous, of the fact that Irfan had gotten this chance. Amira had done a few documentaries, so nobody knew her that well as such. But he got a chance to come to Mumbai. Meera rented a flat on Pedder Road in South Bombay. Meera stayed there. There were a few rooms. Some of the other actors stayed there. Irfan also stayed. And the street children, sometimes they would come and spend the night if they had no place to come and stay. And she got Barry John and a few other people to do. Barry John is this very, very well known theater director who's also done some films. And Meera had learned theater from him. Barry John did the workshops. with the street children and with Irfan. Um, and it was all going very well. Irfan sort of had connected emotionally with all the kids and everything else. But what happened was towards the end, when the actual casting happened, the film's cinematographer and a few other people, including Meera also, felt that Irfan, because he had grown, although he was very thin and lanky, but he had grown up in a middle class family and his nourishment and everything else was very different. So he was not, as far as camera was concerned, he was not gelling very well with the street kids who were undernourished and young and came from very poor, the street kids basically. And so they had to make a very tough decision, and they had to tell Irfan that I don't think you're working with the street kids. Um, and it was heartbreaking and really tough for him. I've heard he cried. Suni Tarpurwala, who wrote the script for Salaam Bombay, said he actually cried. And Suni said, I told him that, when one door closes, another door will open. Meera said to him, look, listen, I have a small role in the film of a letter writer. I'll give you that, but I promise you I'll give you some more work later. Now, the letter writer wrote is actually fascinating. And again, people should see Salaam Bombay in any case. But there's a clip of the letter writing scene in on YouTube. Um, Meera promised him, but it took a while for the promise to take shape, and by the time the namesake happened, of course, but before namesake also, so Meera always knew that when she was casting for namesake, Irfan would play Ashok Ganguly, but she also offered him a couple of small roles also. Meera got funded by the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to make 4 short films on HIV/AIDS. So one, Migration, Meera directed; the others she produced, because Vishal Bhardwaj directed one, and Santosh Shivam directed one. Um, I think Farhan Akhtar directed the one. But in Migration, Irfan plays a small role, again available on YouTube. People should watch, where he plays a closeted gay man who's married, and how the HIV virus passes from one person to another person. Meera even cast him in. There was a anthology of films called I Love New York, in which Meera worked with writer Suketu Mehta, and did a segment, a film called Kosher Vegetarian, where Irfan acts with Natalie Portman. So Irfan plays the role of a Gujarati diamond merchant in New York, which is Suketu Mehta's family. His father was a diamond merchant also, and Natalie Portman works for him, but she's a Orthodox Jewish woman, and there is an emotional connection that, and sort of they fall in love with each other, but obviously there's an imagination. Irfan even thinks about, what if he had been a Hasidic Jew, he would have married her or something. He would have married her, but of course that doesn't happen. So Meera cast him a few times. She kept her promise. It took a while, though, more than a decade.
Of course, she cast him in the namesake, and that's a film that I think is eternal. For me, Ashok Ganguly and his wife, and the love that they share is so it's so poignant. It is so beautiful. It reminds me of my parents, and those little moments that they've had with one another. So there's a very unique bond, obviously, that Meera and Irfan share, right? And which one can see in this entire dynamic in the film, Namesake. Again, like I keep repeating, that Namesake is one of my top films ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I keep going back to Pother Panchali once a month every time. I keep going back also to Namesake constantly. So tell us a little bit, about this entire trust and understanding that the two of them had nurtured, over the years. And do you think that that really reflected in the making of Namesake?
I asked Meera this question, that did Irfan need direction? And she said, of course he needed direction. I mean, she would give him direction. How he absorbed it and how he sort of then portrayed it when the camera was on, that he would do his own way. He had his own training and everything else. There are several moments in the namesake There's a lovely, by the way, you mentioned your parents. Let me come to that first of all. There's a lovely scene which Irfan and Tabu are sitting and having tea. It's just before Irfan's character Ashok leaves for Cleveland, and Meera said that that was like that's how they express love for each other. Parents of that generation, they would not say, although there is a scene in which even says, "Should I say I love you?" But parents they would just sit and
He asks
yeah,
her to tell
yeah. But they would
him.
just sit and have tea.
He requests her to
Yeah,
say,
it's lovely. She says, "Do you want me to say I love you or something like that?" Uh,
and she gets the accent also right. My God, Haseem, this is so heartfelt. I can't begin to tell you. And she says, "You want me to tell you I love you?" And then he says that that Bengali hair. And that Bengali hair is a full of, it is innocent, it is tender, it is hopeful. I think it is one of the
And
most
there's also
amazing
another
scenes
scene when they
there.
go to the
There, yeah,
Taj
yeah.
Mahal and they're sitting together, and she says something about that. Look, these the kings, etc., used to build these emperors would build these monuments, and he said, there are other husbands also do something like that or something, and they briefly hold their hands, and suddenly Gogol character Kalpin walks up to them when he says, "I'm going to be an architect" or something, and they both um, don't touch. But sitting and drinking tea was their way of expressing love for each other, really. But you asked me the question about Meera and Irfan. There's a great scene towards the end of the film, almost where so people who have seen Namesake know that it's inspired by Nikolai Gogol's The Overcoat. And Irfan's character, Ashok, actually gives the copy of Overcoat to his son as a gift, and the son is totally drugged out at the time, couldn't care less or something like that. Because Ashok Ganguly believed that there was a train accident, and because he was holding the book in his hand, his life was saved. Much later, towards the end of the book and the film, Ashok Ganguly is going for a car ride with his son, and he again tells his son this whole story about the train accident and the book and how it saved his life. Um, so when they were shooting the scene, and this is the question of how Meera and Irfan would be able to read each other. They shot the scene with the camera on Irfan's face when he's talking to his son, and then Meera said cut, and Irfan could see Meera was not 100% satisfied, so he actually said, "क्या कुछ और चाहिए?" And Meera said, "हाँ, एक थोड़ा सा आंसू, a little tear in your eye, but I don't want you to roll it down. It should just stay in your eyes." And this is what a fine actor Irfan was. And there are other actors who some maybe be able to do it. He's able to well the tears, the tears appear in his eyes, but he's able to control them that it does not actually trickle down his face. And so this is a second take, and Meera said, "I just used the second take," and he just exactly followed the direction I gave him. And I think there's something really fascinating about the craft as such, and a director and an actor, how they trust each other, and how the director sort of knows that if she gives a certain kind of direction to the actor would just do that and not more. It's really lovely. This story, which I've and now I've watched the
That's
scene so
amazing.
many times. I've seen the film so many times also. By the way, I'm a Bengali at heart. Also, I'm born Punjabi, but so then something like The Namesake, or you mentioned Patir Panchali. Those films really touch me, and they've stayed with me for
Absolutely.
so long.
Me too. So let's just talk a little bit about Irfan Khan's portrayal of Pi in the life of Pi. So let's just talk, there's been reshooting scenes across different locations. Did it impact, his performance in that?
Life of Pi was a very, very complicated film. First of all, it was shot in 3D. And there are so many parts of the story. There's a part of the story which is shot in Pondicherry, and you had uh, Tabu and Adil Hussain playing young Pai's parents. And then they go on this boat journey. They're heading towards Canada, and then the storm hits, and then eventually everybody dies. But the Pai, who was played by Suraj Patel, he and a tiger are in this boat. So, and Irfan played the role of older Pai, because Pai then migrates to Montreal, and Irfan played that role. Um, some of the interior shots of the Montreal apartment were actually shot in Taiwan. Ang Lee is a Taiwanese American filmmaker, so they were shot in Taiwan. The exterior shots were actually done in Montreal. Um, the entire scene of the boat and the tiger, Richard Parker stuck in a boat, those were actually shot. It was an abandoned airport in Taiwan, which was made into a big giant lake kind of a thing. There's a very keen. So the film actually starts with Pai is being interviewed by a journalist because there's a story that Pai tells, and whether you believe it or not, that he had been on this journey with a tiger, and whether Pai is telling the truth, whether he believes in it or not, that's a part of the thing. Um, and it's left to the audience basically, and people who read the book, it's left to them to actually believe whether it's true or not. Ang Lee shot the interior scenes initially with Irfan, of course, playing the older Pai, the actor Tobey Maguire. Now, Tobey Maguire had acted in some of Ang Lee's early films. He was in a film called Ice Storm. He was in a western called Right Devil. But by the time Pai was being shot, Tobey Maguire had done 3 Spider-Man films. And once those scenes were shot, Ang Lee actually felt that he actually realized what Hollywood stardom means, because there was this big Hollywood star, Tobey Maguire, in a small supporting role, and there was Irrfan Khan, an actor from India, who, by the way, always struggled with his English, and he was trying to speak a French Canadian, Montreal sort of in English also in the film. Um, and Ang Lee didn't think that that scene worked out. And he then decided to cast a lesser known British actor in the role of the French Canadian journalist. And 4 or 5 months after the scene had been shot in in a studio in Taiwan, Ang Lee told Irfan that, I think you will have to do it again. I'm so sorry, but and Irfan had completely erased that memory of that film because it was a very tough film, really, even for him. And he had moved on because he'd done his shoot, and 4 or 5 months had gone by, and he'd gone and done something else. And Ang Lee made him reshoot those scenes. And it's a very, very key scene in the film, actually. It appears toward the end of the film where Pai is narrating to this journalist how he was on this boat with the tiger. They finally hit the shores, and both Pai and the tiger are very much. And there's a certain understanding the tiger and the young Pai has developed, basically. But when they reach the shore, the tiger just gets off and just walks into the jungle. And what Pai says in the book, and he says in the film also, is that what is really heartbreaking and sad is that when you part, the person doesn't come back and say goodbye. Now, you don't expect a tiger to have that kind of feeling. And by the way, the tiger was always CGI. There was never a real tiger in the film. Um, and so Irfan plays, there's a whole dialogue where Irfan narrates, speaks out, and he actually cries in that scene also. And in fact, Ang Lee said, I interviewed him, he said that he, again, never asked Irfan to cry. Like Meera actually said, I want you to cry a little bit. Ang Lee said, I just tell my actors what the scene requires. They know what the dialogue is, they've read the script, etc. How they process it, how they actually then present it in front of the camera is their job. Ang Lee was very, very satisfied when Irfan's character cries in it, but it's not something he had asked for it. But he felt that between the dialogue that Irfan speaks out and the tears in his eyes, that really wraps up the film. The whole point of the film really comes out alive, the way Irfan sort of plays that role really. Um, and it was a very, very tough film. As I said, there's a gap of 4 or 5 months, and you've forgotten those scenes, you've forgotten the emotions, you started doing some other film, and then you're suddenly asked to come and do the same role again. Very few actors would be able to do it, but Irfan did that.
Thank you so much, Aseem. I mean, I can go on and on. I can go on another hour or so just talking to you because we are talking to each other heart to heart, as I would put it, because I'm equally obsessed about films and Irrfan Khan. So I'm sure all our listeners are really, really going to remember, all these anecdotes that you shared with us. Thank you so much for being on today's podcast, and thank you.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun and revisiting a book I wrote. And my heart is still in it, really. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.